December 21st, 1944, Eastern Belgium, 06 and 47 hours. The engine idles like a caged animal. Inside the cramped hull of the Sherman tank, Staff Sergeant Lafayette Pool holds his breath and watches. Through the narrow vision slit, four shapes emerge from the gray morning fog, low, angular, predatory. Panther tanks, German, moving in a loose wedge across the frozen farm field, their long 75mm guns sweeping left and right like the heads of hunting wolves. Pool's gunner, Corporal Willis Aller, whispers into the intercom, "Jesus Christ, Sarge, 4 of them." The math is simple. 4 Panthers, 1 Sherman. In open ground, this is suicide. The Panther's frontal armor can shrug off most American shells. Its gun can puncture a Sherman from 1,000 yards. Pool knows this. Every tanker in Europe knows this. The standard doctrine is clear. Don't engage frontally. Flank, evade, call for air support. But there is no time. Pool's hand tightens on the turret traverse. His voice is calm, almost flat. "Driver, reverse, slow, into the tree line." The driver hesitates. "Reverse, Sarge?" "You heard me. Back us in and kill the engine." The Sherman begins to move, not forward, backward, into the shadows. To understand what happened in that frozen Belgian field, you must first understand the war Pool was fighting. By December 1944, the Allied advance across France and into the Low Countries had become a grinding, brutal affair. The euphoria of the summer breakout, the race across the Seine, the liberation of Paris, had faded into cold reality. The German army, though battered, had not collapsed. It had retreated, reorganized, and dug in along a series of defensive lines stretching from the Swiss border to the North Sea, and in the forested hills of Belgium and Luxembourg, it was preparing one last desperate counterstrike. This was the prelude to the Battle of the Bulge for the American armored divisions operating in this sector. The tactical picture was bleak. German Panzer units, though fewer in number than earlier in the war, remained extraordinarily dangerous. At the heart of this danger was the Panther tank, officially the Panzerkampfwagen 5. Introduced in 1943 after the shock of encountering Soviet T-34s on the Eastern Front, the Panther was designed to dominate. Its sloped frontal armor was 80mm thick at an angle that made it nearly immune to the standard American 75mm gun at combat ranges. Its high-velocity 75mm KWK-42 cannon could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor from over 2,000 yards. American tankers called it the Cat. They feared it more than the heavier Tiger because the Panther was faster, more common, and just as deadly. The Sherman, by contrast, was a workhorse, reliable, easy to repair, produced in staggering numbers. But in a direct shootout with a Panther, it was outmatched. The Sherman's 75mm gun could only reliably penetrate a Panther's frontal armor at point-blank range under 200 yards, and only if the shot hit perfectly. Most Sherman crews never got that close. They died at distance, their tanks brewing up in seconds as German shells ignited ammunition and fuel. American commanders knew this. Tank crews knew this. And yet the Shermans kept rolling forward because there was no alternative. The infantry needed armor support. The advance had to continue. And so American tankers developed a kind of fatalistic pragmatism. They learned to use terrain, to ambush, to flank, to accept losses and hope their numbers would overwhelm German quality. Lafayette Pool was not a typical tanker. By December 1944, he was already a legend within the 3rd Armored Division. A Texan, soft-spoken and methodical, Pool had joined the division in Normandy and quickly distinguished himself as one of the most lethal tank commanders in the European theater. His crew had destroyed dozens of German vehicles, tanks, half-tracks, trucks, across France and Belgium. He had survived the Bocage, the Falaise Pocket, the bitter urban fighting in Stolberg. His Sherman, nicknamed In the Mood, had been hit multiple times but never knocked out. Pool's reputation was built on one principle: stay calm, stay smart, and never fight fair. He understood that the Sherman's advantages were not armor or firepower. They were mobility, crew coordination, and the ability to exploit terrain. In the hedgerow country of Normandy, he had perfected the art of the ambush, waiting in cover, firing first, and displacing before the enemy could respond. He had learned to read the landscape like a predator reads a trail. And he had learned that in tank combat, the side that moves first often dies first. But this principle, this instinct to wait, to reverse, to hide, was about to be tested in a way Pool had never experienced. The operational environment in eastern Belgium, December 1944, was a tanker's nightmare. The terrain was a chaotic mix of dense pine forests, narrow farm valleys, and open fields bordered by thick hedgerows and stone farm buildings. Roads were few, muddy, and easily blocked. Visibility was limited by fog, snow, and the short winter days. For the German defenders, this was ideal ground. They could conceal their positions, channel American movements, and strike from ambush. For the Americans, every advance was a slow, nerve-wracking crawl into the unknown. Pool's unit, Company I 32nd Armored Regiment, 3rd Armored Division, had been operating in the is region for weeks. They had pushed east from Aachen, cleared pockets of resistance, and reached the outskirts of the Roer River Valley. But progress had been slow. German resistance was stiffening. Panzer units were appearing with increasing frequency, and American intelligence was reporting a buildup of armor in the Ardennes sector to the south. The men of the 3rd Armored were tired. They had been in continuous combat since June. Many of the original crews were gone, killed, wounded, or rotated out. Replacements arrived weekly, green and terrified, and had to learn on the job. Pool's crew was one of the few that had stayed together since Normandy. They trusted each other completely. Gunner Willis Aller could put a shell through a vision slit at 600 yards. Driver Bert Close could coax the Sherman through mud, snow, or shell craters without getting stuck. Loader Del Boggs could reload in under 4 seconds, even under fire. And assistant driver Wilbert Richards handled the bow machine gun with calm precision. They were a team, and they knew that in tank combat, cohesion was survival. The tactical doctrine drilled into every Sherman crew was simple. Avoid frontal engagements with Panthers or Tigers. Use speed and numbers to flank. Call in artillery or air support. If you must fight, get close. Close enough that the Panther's gun can't depress low enough, close enough that your 75mm has a chance. But doctrine and reality were different things. On the morning of December 21st, Pool's platoon had been tasked with screening the eastern flank of the division's advance. They were moving through a series of small farming villages, checking for German positions and securing crossroads. The weather was miserable, overcast, cold, with patches of freezing fog that reduced visibility to a few hundred yards. At 06 and 40 hours, Pool's Sherman was moving slowly along a farm track when the radio crackled. A forward observer reported movement. German armor, possibly a platoon, advancing west through the valley ahead. Pool ordered his driver to halt. He scanned the terrain through his periscope. Ahead, the ground opened into a wide, flat field bordered by a tree line on the left and a cluster of farm buildings on the right. Beyond the field, the land rose into a low ridge covered in fog. It was perfect ambush ground, if you were the one waiting. Pool made a decision. Instead of advancing to meet the enemy, he would reverse his Sherman into a concealed position at the edge of the tree line, hull down, and wait. Let the Panthers come to him. Let them enter the killing ground. It was unconventional. Most tankers, when spotting enemy armor, advanced to engage or withdrew to call for support. Reversing into an ambush position took time, required precise driving, and left you vulnerable if spotted. But Pool trusted his crew, and he trusted his instinct. "Driver," he said quietly into the intercom, "back us into those trees, nice and slow. Gunner, keep your eye on that ridge." The Sherman began to move backward, its engine rumbling softly, tracks crunching over frozen earth, and then, through the fog, the Panthers appeared. Lafayette Green Pool was 21 years old. He had grown up in Odom, Texas, a small town where everyone knew everyone, and hard work was the only currency that mattered. He enlisted in the Army in 1942 volunteered for armor, and trained at Fort Knox before shipping out to England in early 1944. He was quiet, polite, and utterly unflappable under fire. His crew called him War Daddy, though never to his face. By December 1944, Pool had been in combat for over 180 days. He had survived Normandy, where half his company was lost in the first 2 weeks. He had fought through the Bocage, where German anti-tank guns hid in every hedgerow. He had seen friends die, tanks burning, men screaming, bodies pulled from hatches. And yet, he never hesitated, never froze. He simply adapted. His philosophy was simple. The Germans have better tanks, so we have to be smarter. The Panther was not just a tank, it was a psychological weapon. Weighing 45 tons, powered by a 700-horsepower Maybach engine, the Panther could reach speeds of 30 miles per hour on roads and maintain 15 mph cross-country. Its 75mm gun fired armor-piercing rounds at 3,000 feet per second, fast enough to punch through any Allied tank in Europe. Its armor was sloped at 55 degrees, meaning even direct hits often ricocheted harmlessly away. American intelligence estimated that a Panther could destroy a Sherman at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards, while a Sherman could only reliably kill a Panther at under 500 yards, and only from the side or rear. This disparity created a brutal calculus. To kill a Panther, you had to get close. But getting close meant exposing yourself to its gun. Most Sherman crews never made it. The farm field where Pool waited was roughly 400 yards wide and 600 yards deep. It sloped gently downward from the ridge where the Panthers were approaching. The ground was frozen, dotted with stubble from the autumn harvest, and bordered on three sides by tree lines and farm structures. For the Panthers, it looked like open ground, ideal for their long-range guns. But for Pool, it was a trap. The tree line where his Sherman was concealed provided cover and a clear field of fire. The Panthers would have to cross the open ground to engage him, and in doing so, they would expose their flanks. Pool had chosen his ground carefully. Now he would make the Germans pay for entering it. Reversing a 33-ton Sherman tank into a concealed firing position is not standard procedure. Most tank commanders, when engaging enemy armor, advance to contact, moving forward to close the distance, acquire the target, and fire. Reversing is slower, requires precise coordination between commander and driver, and leaves the tank vulnerable if the engine stalls or the crew loses situational awareness. But Pool understood something most tankers didn't. In an ambush, the first shot is everything. By reversing into the tree line, Pool positioned his Sherman so that only the turret and upper hull were visible from the field. The lower hull, tracks, and engine were hidden behind a low berm and underbrush. This hull-down position minimized his profile and made him nearly invisible in the fog and shadows. More importantly, it allowed him to wait. The Panthers, advancing into the open field, would be silhouetted against the lighter sky behind them. Pool's gunner would have a clear shot at their flanks as they passed. And if the Panthers spotted him and returned fire, Pool could reverse further into the trees, reload, and reposition. It was a gamble, but it was a calculated one. Inside the Sherman, every man had a role. Bert Close, the driver, sat in the front left corner of the hull, his hands on the steering levers, eyes fixed on the narrow vision slit in front of him. He couldn't see the Panthers. He couldn't see the field. He could only hear Pool's voice in his headset and trust that the orders were right. Willis Aller, the gunner, sat to the right of the main gun, his eye pressed to the periscope sight. He could see the Panthers now, gray shapes moving through the fog. His hand rested on the turret traverse crank, making tiny adjustments, keeping the crosshairs centered. Del Boggs, the loader, stood behind Aller, a 75mm armor-piercing shell already in his hands. The breech was open, the shell was ready. He didn't speak, he just waited. Wilbert Richards, the assistant driver, manned the bow machine gun in the front right hull. His job was to watch for infantry, but his eyes were fixed on the Panthers. And Pool stood in the turret, half exposed above the hatch, scanning the field with binoculars. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "Gunner, traverse right. Lead Panther, range 600. Identified," Aller whispered. "Wait for my command." The crew held their breath. The Panther crews had no idea they were being watched. From their perspective, the farm field ahead was empty. The morning fog obscured the tree line. Intelligence reports had indicated scattered American patrols in the area, but nothing significant. The four Panthers, part of a larger panzer formation moving to reinforce the Ardennes offensive, were advancing in standard formation, confident in their superiority. The lead Panther commander, a veteran Oberfeldwebel, scanned the terrain through his cupola periscope. He saw nothing. No movement, no muzzle flashes. The field was quiet. He ordered his driver to increase speed. It was a fatal mistake. The lead Panther reached the center of the field. Pool's voice cut through the silence. "Fire!" The Sherman's 75mm gun roared. The recoil rocked the hull backward. Inside, the concussion was deafening, even through the intercom headsets. The shell crossed the 600 yards in less than 2 seconds and struck the lead Panther just below the turret ring, where the side armor was thinnest. The Panther shuddered. Smoke erupted from the engine deck. The turret froze mid-traverse. The crew bailed out, 3 men, then 4, running across the frozen ground toward the ridge. "Hit! Loader! Reload!" Pool's voice was still calm. Boggs slammed another shell into the breech. The block closed with a metallic clang. "Up!" The other 3 Panthers reacted instantly. Their turrets swung toward the tree line, searching for the source of the shot. The second Panther fired blindly into the trees, the muzzle flash lighting up the fog. The shell screamed overhead, exploding in the woods behind Pool's position. "They don't have us yet," Pool said. "Traverse left, second Panther, range 550. Aller cranked the turret. The crosshairs settled on the second Panther's flank. The German tank was turning, trying to angle its frontal armor toward the threat, but it was too slow. Fire! Another roar, another hit. This time the shell penetrated the Panther's rear engine compartment. Flames billowed out. The Panther lurched forward, then stopped. The crew began to evacuate, 2 down. But now the remaining Panthers had located Pool's position. The third Panther fired. The shell struck the tree just to the left of the Sherman, exploding in a shower of splinters and frozen bark. Shrapnel pinged off the turret. "Back us up," Pool ordered. 20 feet. Close threw the Sherman into reverse. The tank lurched backward, deeper into the trees. Branches scraped across the hull. The engine roared. Pool never took his eyes off the field. The third Panther was advancing now, moving at speed toward the tree line, trying to close the distance and negate Pool's concealment. It was a bold move, aggressive, desperate. The German commander knew he was exposed, but he also knew that if he could get close enough, his superior armor would dominate. Pool watched through his binoculars. He waited until the Panther was 300 yards away, then 250. "Gunner, lead him. Aim for the lower hull. Identified. Fire when ready." Aller fired. The shell struck low, just above the Panther's right track. The impact shattered the suspension and blew the track off. The Panther slewed sideways out of control and ground to a halt. The turret began to traverse, the gun swinging toward Pool's position. "Load he!" Pool snapped. Boggs grabbed a high-explosive shell and rammed it into the breach. "Up! Fire!" The HE shell hit the immobilized Panther's turret ring. The explosion was massive, a bright orange flash that lit up the entire field. The Panther's turret lifted off its mount and crashed back down at an angle. Fire poured from the hatches. 3 down. The fourth Panther stopped. For a long moment, nothing moved. The field was filled with smoke and the crackle of burning fuel. The fourth Panther sat 700 yards away, partially obscured by the fog and the smoke from its dead companions. Pool could see its commander standing in the open cupola, scanning with binoculars. The German was making a decision. Pool knew what he was thinking. 3 Panthers lost. No visual on the enemy position. Unknown number of American tanks. The tactical situation was untenable. The smart move was to withdraw, call in artillery, and return with infantry support. But Pool also knew that the Panther's guns still had the range advantage. If the German fired blindly into the tree line, he might get lucky, and Pool's Sherman, though hidden, it's not invincible. "Gunner, can you range him?" "Barely, Sarge. He's at the edge of effective range." "Take the shot, aim high, try for the turret." Aller adjusted the sight. The Panther was hull down behind a slight rise in the ground, only the turret visible. It was a difficult shot, 700 yards, moving target, fog. Aller exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. The gun fired. The shell arced across the field. Pool watched through his binoculars, tracking the trajectory. For a moment, he thought it would miss. Then the shell struck the Panther's turret front, just left of the gun mantelet. The impact was brutal, a shower of sparks and metal fragments. The Panther's gun barrel drooped. Smoke poured from the turret hatches. But the tank didn't brew up. The crew bailed out, running toward the ridge. The Panther sat silent, crippled but not burning. 4 for 4, Boggs whispered. Pool didn't respond. He scanned the ridge, looking for more movement. There was none. The German advance had stopped. The remaining Panzers, if there were any, had pulled back beyond the ridge. "Driver, hold position," Pool said. "Gunner, keep scanning. Richards, watch our flanks." The crew waited. The field was silent except for the crackle of burning tanks and the low rumble of the Sherman's engine. After 5 minutes, Pool keyed the radio. "Charlie 6, this is Charlie 2-1. Contact complete. 4 enemy Panthers destroyed or disabled. No friendly casualties. Over." The radio crackled. "Charlie 2-1, confirm. 4 Panthers. Confirmed, all 4. Over." There was a long pause. Then, "Outstanding 2-1. Hold position. Support en route. Out." Pool lowered the radio handset. His hands were shaking, not from fear, just adrenaline burn. He looked at his crew. Aller was staring straight ahead, expressionless. Boggs was slumped against the turret wall, eyes closed. Close was gripping the steering lever so hard his knuckles were white. "Good work, boys," Pool said quietly. No one answered. There was nothing to say. Outside, the Panthers burned. The field was a graveyard. By 800 hours, the fog had lifted enough for Pool and his crew to dismount and assess the damage. 3 of the 4 Panthers were total losses, burning hulks with turrets blown open and hulls shattered. The fourth, the one Aller had hit at range, sat silent with its gun mangled and turret jammed. German bodies lay scattered in the frozen stubble where crews had tried to escape and been cut down by machine gun fire from Pool's supporting infantry. Pool walked slowly around his Sherman. The tank was scarred but intact. One section of the turret armor showed a deep gouge where a German shell had struck at an angle and ricocheted away. Another shell had hit the ground just in front of the tracks, cratering the earth but causing no damage. They had been lucky, incredibly lucky. Bert Close climbed out of the driver's hatch and lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "Thought we were dead," he said flatly. "4 Panthers, Jesus." "We had the ground," Pool replied. Then a jeep arrived carrying the company commander, Captain James Burt. He walked across the field, stopped in front of the nearest burning Panther, and just stared. Then he turned to Pool. "Sergeant, I need you to explain to me what the hell just happened here." Pool described the engagement in his usual flat, methodical tone. The reverse maneuver, the hull-down position, the flank shots, the patience to wait for each target to expose itself. Bert listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Pool finished, Bert shook his head slowly. "You reversed into an ambush position against 4 Panthers." "Yes, sir." "That's insane." "It worked, sir." Bert almost smiled. "Yeah, it did." He pulled out a notebook and began sketching the engagement, positions, ranges, sequence of fire. This was the kind of tactical innovation that needed to be documented, studied, and disseminated. The Sherman crews in Europe were desperate for any edge they could find against German armor, and Pool had just demonstrated a technique that could save lives. But Pool wasn't thinking about doctrine or tactics. He was thinking about the German crews. He had watched them burn, watched them run. Some had made it to the ridge, some hadn't. It was war, it was necessary, but it was never easy. The news of Pool's engagement spread quickly through the 3rd Armored Division. By the evening of December 21st, every tank company in the division had heard some version of the story. A single Sherman, ambushed by 4 Panthers, destroyed all 4 without loss. The details varied. Some versions had Pool killing 6 Panthers, others had him single-handedly stopping a German counterattack, but the core fact remained. 1 crew, 4 kills. For the exhausted, battered Sherman crews of the division, it was a badly needed morale boost. The Panther had been a specter haunting every engagement, a nightmare that could appear at any moment and kill you before you even saw it. But Pool had proven it could be beaten, not with superior firepower or armor, but with patience, positioning, and nerve. The 3rd Armored's intelligence section confirmed the kills 2 days later. Examination of the wrecks revealed that all 4 Panthers belonged to the 2nd SS Panzer Division, one of the elite units spearheading the Ardennes offensive. They had been moving west to join the main assault when Pool intercepted them. Pool received the Silver Star for the engagement, though the medal wouldn't be formally presented until months later. He didn't care about the medal. What mattered was that his crew had survived, and that the lessons of the fight, use terrain, reverse into position, wait for the flank shot, could help other crews survive. But the cost of that survival was written into the frozen earth of the Belgian farm field. 4 German tanks destroyed, 15 German tankers dead or wounded, and Pool's own crew still alive but carrying the weight of what they had done. Willis Aller never spoke about the engagement after that day. Del Boggs requested a transfer to the infantry 3 weeks later. Bert Close finished the war and went home to Missouri, where he never told his family what had happened in Belgium. Lafayette Pool continued fighting. He would go on to destroy a total of 258 German vehicles before being wounded in September 1944 and evacuated from combat. He survived the war and returned to Texas, where he lived quietly until his death in 1991. The 4 Panthers still lie in that Belgian field, buried beneath 6 feet of earth and 75 years of grass. The farmer who owns the land knows they are there. Sometimes, when plowing, his tractor strikes a piece of metal, a track link, a shell casing, a fragment of armor. He leaves them where they are, memorials without names, graves without markers. The field remembers. There is a photograph, grainy and faded, taken in early 1945. It shows Lafayette Pool standing beside his Sherman, arms crossed, expression calm. Behind him, the turret is scarred with dozens of impact marks, ricochets, near misses, the evidence of 100 close calls. He is 21 years old. He looks 50. The story of Pool's reverse ambush is not about heroism in the traditional sense. It is not about charging forward, guns blazing, into the face of overwhelming odds. It is about something quieter and more essential, the kind of tactical intelligence and calm decision-making that separates survival from annihilation in mechanized warfare. Poole understood that in tank combat, victory belongs not to the strongest, but to the smartest. The Panther was the better machine, but Poole was the better tactician. He read the terrain, he controlled his crew, he waited for the perfect moment, and when that moment came, he struck without hesitation. The lesson of that frozen December morning in Belgium is not that the Sherman was equal to the Panther. It wasn't. The lesson is that in war, superiority is contextual. Terrain, tactics, and timing can overcome raw firepower. Intelligence can defeat strength. Patience can beat aggression. But there is another lesson, darker and harder to name. The 4 Panthers burning in that field were not just machines. They were crewed by men, fathers, brothers, sons, who believed they were defending their homeland. They died in a foreign field, far from home, beyond, because of decisions made by leaders they never met. Poole knew this. He carried it. War is not a story. It is a series of moments, brief, brutal, irreversible, that echo forward through time. The moment Poole gave the order to reverse. The moment Aller squeezed the trigger. The moment the first Panther exploded. Those moments shaped the rest of their lives. The field is quiet now. The smoke has cleared. The metal has rusted. The men have gone home or into the earth. But the lesson remains inscribed in the soil and the memory. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not move forward. Sometimes survival demands you reverse into the darkness, wait for the enemy to reveal himself, and strike only when the moment is yours. That is the art of war, and Lafayette Pool was its master.